We've been looking at the CV gate system in Reason, and I promised in the last tutorial that I would show you some kind of super modulated system here. And I've gone ahead and built something, but what I need to make you aware of is that there's really no limit here. And that's something difficult to get your head around, especially if you're coming from another DAW or if you're just getting into the CV system. Because in other DAWs, you've sort of got a finite limit of where you can route things to. You can generally route things to a bus, or you can modulate things within one synth. You know, other DAWs take things further. So maybe in Ableton, you can put things into racks, and you can join instruments together. And even in Reason, we can combine synths. But using the CV system, we can take it much further. We can route things between instruments. We can join instruments that are on different channels. We can play things back on the same channel. We can route several combinators. We can route mix functions with synth modulators. I mean, the list goes on. Really, the only limit here is your imagination. There is no end, which is pretty difficult to sort of start to think about, because it can be a bit mind-blowing. But with that in mind, this is simply a single example of what I built in, say, 10, 15 minutes. And I really had to just stop myself, because you can just fill up the whole rack with one instrument. So what I did was I kept the Thor that we were running through the two spiders, and that's actually modulating a subtractor, and they're both going through a mixer. Okay, so that's all combinated. I don't know if that's a word. And then I started to spread things out a little, and this is where it gets a little complex. But I took the CV, split that into the pan here. Sorry, of the second splitter went into the pan of the mixer. So we started to pan the subtractor with an LFO, and we're going to start to look at the mix functions in the next tutorial a little more. But that gives you an idea that it's not just synth options that have got CV system. Anywhere you see this small CV input is a CV, modulation source or destination, and you can modulate the panning in this mixer with basically anything you want. And if you look at the reverb here, there's even CV inputs in the reverb. So it's effects, it's everything. I then went ahead and built a matrix. And I started to split, this is to show you another example, I started to split the trigger of the matrix into a spider. Now, let's just hide the cables again. I'm using K to do that, by the way. We can take a note CV output and a gate CV output and take one into one side of the spider and the other into the other side of the spider. And I suspect this is why the spider's built this way, to give you the opportunity to do this so you don't have to use two. But you can basically split a sequencer signal, because you need both the note and the gate to get a proper sequencer signal. And then you can split that to wherever you want. And I actually took that to a new combinator, because each combinator's got a gate CV in. So I made two combinators, and I split the CV from this matrix to go to the first combinator, the second and the third. So all the combinators in this rack are receiving a signal from the matrix. Okay, stay with me. And then we took the CV LFO from this Thor that's in this combinator and took it to the pan of the mixer here, which pans one of the instruments. And then this instrument, the filter cutoff, is being modulated by the LFO from the subtractor in the first combinator. Now you can see how this is just completely open-ended. And ultimately, if you wanted to take any of these sources and split them into multiple destinations, just add another spider or merge them. You know, or add one of these utilities that I showed you, the delay utilities from Jiggery Pokery software in the Rack Extensions store. I mean, you know, it doesn't end. So what do we end up with? Well, we end up with sort of an ambient instrument that is two synths in here, two synths in this one, and a dulcimer sort of effect here. It sounds sort of like the orb, pretty ambient. Pretty sort of progressive rock. But really, you know, as I was working on it, I didn't know what was going to happen, which is the beautiful thing about it. I wasn't really after this specific sound. I just programmed a pretty random pattern and messed with a few velocities, and then started making instruments and started routing things to places. And you end up with this really interesting texture. You know, you've got this sort of dulcimer in the background. You've got this crazy ambient. I mean, you could modulate these as well, obviously. And then you've got the original synth. Which we can edit and mix. But you get the idea. The great thing about this is that this single matrix is triggering all of them. And obviously, if you've got a sequence in a matrix, you can spread this out to as many different locations as you want using the spider. So understanding the fact that, you know, you can take CV to anywhere, and understanding the fact you can split it to infinite points is really useful. Because not only can you use the matrix, but you can also use the arpeggiator or anything that produces a sequence. The redrum, the Thor has a sequencer output on it. So there's plenty of options to get your sequences out into other devices. After I showed you the mixer pan being modulated, I wanted to dig a little further into that and show you that it's not just these individual rack mixers that have CV ins, but also other mix functions. So it's not just synthesizers. So we're going to have a little look at the CV gate in the mix and how you can manipulate sort of mix features with it. And that's how we're going to finish up the whole course.